The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington,
working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts.
Including YouTube.
Presenting Again Fling's love story. Dear love of my life, we were on the 12B bus when I caught a whiff. A scent so fresh, so life-changing, I had to find its source. I didn't know if you were the woman in the pink freshly washed cardigan or the retired mailman next to me, but I knew one of you was my soulmate. Ah, the scent of Gain Flings. Try Gain Flings, available at your local H-E-B today.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Have you been out for a meal lately? A report from Restaurants Canada suggests the food service industry is in for another bumpy year. And for many of the same reasons as last year, along with a few new ones. The Q4 report shows nearly half of food service operators, or about 46%, expect their profitability to be worse in 2026. And we need these businesses to thrive, as you'll hear, for plenty of reasons. Welcome to this episode of In This Economy. I'm Kris McCusker. Let's take a closer look at this report to better understand with my guest today, Kelly Higginson, the President and CEO at Restaurants Canada. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about this today.
Thanks for having me.
So walk me through some of the findings here. What are sort of the most noteworthy or worth highlighting, I guess, from this data you've collected, this Q4 quarterly report?
Sure. So while we saw the GST holiday and strong domestic tourism boost food service sales in 2025, it was the rising operating costs and the U.S. trade war that really cut into the profit margins. And we had 60% of operators report that profitability in 2025 was much worse than expected and compared to 2024, as they saw those rising operating costs continue to narrow their margins throughout the year. And as we look at 2026, restaurants expect a more challenging year because we won't have those temporary boosts, such as the GST holiday and some of the focus on that domestic tourism that we saw. But we are also navigating the chronic affordability challenges. So we're also seeing consumers pulling back on discretionary spending, such as restaurants.
Yeah, it would seem to me that everything's sort of culminating in kind of a perfect storm of not great all at the same time for Canadian restaurants. And I mean, I hear this all the time, and it's worth repeating. These sorts of businesses are crucial to the Canadian economy.
Well, to that point, I think there's a few things that I'd love to highlight in that. So we have 44% of our restaurants operating at a loss or just barely breaking even as of November 2025. That is up from 41% in June. So we're seeing it tick up. And in contrast, from 2019, that level was 12%. So very sharp contrast in comparison to 2019. So to your point, though, about its impact on the economy, the restaurant sector is the 4th largest private employer in the country. We operate in every community across the country. So there's a direct impact to the local community and to the larger Canadian economy. But there's a big impact on jobs throughout all communities. Another piece of that is 40% of our workforce are youth. So that challenging area where we're already seeing some struggles, we are predicting that there's going to be less hiring. We are going to inevitably have to shed some positions within our operations, probably going to be seeing some less hiring in some markets because of these challenges.
And the other thing, I mean, I'm just thinking of this as you're outlining all of these findings, like restaurants were already hit pretty hard because when COVID struck, they were some of the first businesses to close.
Well, to be honest, we were actually one of the only businesses to be pretty much fully shut down for extended periods of time. And so that also, to your point, means that we came out of that period with a significant amount of debt that in many cases we're still trying to manage, right? We took on lines of credit, we added mortgages to homes, we racked up multiple credit cards just to try and make it work. So in some cases, we are seeing that people are still managing that high debt. But we're also really having a tough time if 5, 6 years later in managing that continuous inflationary pressures. So, Canadians see groceries go up, that cuts into the money they have to shop or to spend in a restaurant. But the same cost increases are going up for our operations. Food costs are going up, all the input costs are going up. And then we had the trade war, which has just seen, the retaliatory tariffs were really impactful for our sector. All of the products we need for repairs, sinks, dishwashers, everything inevitably at some point come through the United States. So it's been a bit of a double whammy, triple whammy over the last year for sure.
You mentioned as well the GST holiday, and there was this sort of GST announcement made by the Prime Minister earlier this year to sort of offer a bit of a break to Canadian households, but nothing for restaurants in that.
Well, we were very supportive of it for a couple reasons. What I will say is that anything that this government can do to address affordability for Canadians will inevitably help the economy. It will help ease some of those pressures. And we do know historically that when people do get some sort of a rebate, we see a small little boost. But to your point, it is a very short-term impact. And it doesn't allow us to do business modeling around something like that, right? So the lack of predictability in operating these businesses, and again, I go back to this is a significant part of our economy, fourth largest private employer, $124 billion industry, $28 billion in taxes, like very significant to our local and the broader economy. But if we've got all these pressures on us, and all this unpredictability in the economy, it makes it very difficult for our operators to business model on that, to make investments into their businesses, to continue to expand. And that's where we see really the challenges going into the next few years.
I guess part of the problem as well, I mean, the unknown or the uncertainty around all of this is a big part of the issue, but there have been policy flips, let's face it, out of the United States back and forth. Plus, is there a bit of a seasonality problem right now in that, local food sources are a little more scarce at this time of year?
Sure. I mean, you know what? We do see challenges with supply and, that definitely impacts us. But that's something that we work into our business model because it tends to be the same every year, except for right now, because to your point, we are seeing this unpredictability to the south of us. So something that was in place, then 2 months later, we're seeing dramatic changes to that. We have to redirect our ordering, which there's all of these things that really impact on how to operate these businesses. So the unpredictability with policies, with the decision-making down south, all of those things are going to impact us. And then I will go back to the challenges here at home with the chronic affordability issues and Canadians really feeling that this is a long, constant challenge of them not having that discretionary spending, and they're continually having to pull back on some of those things that, for hardworking Canadians, being able to have pizza night at the end of the week with your family because it's been a busy week and you've got kids going every direction, like that's not a big ask for a lot of Canadians. So this inability for Canadians to be able to actually enjoy those moments is impacting the quality of their day-to-day life. And I do think that we're going to need to see more done by the government than has been announced around the GST rebates for groceries and other items, that we're looking forward to being a part of that conversation. And we will go back to removing GST from all food in a time where we've seen that continual food inflation really impacting Canadians. Checks a lot of boxes.
Okay, I was going to ask you to elaborate on what else you might push the government for. Are you able to do that?
Yes, I mean, just to go into just a bit more detail, like the GST, to be able to remove GST from all food, we're going to see that stimulate, obviously, our businesses, or we saw an increase of almost 10% in sales. So we had more people coming through the doors. We had higher average checks. So people were really utilizing that dropping of the GST off of food. But the other side of it is we created almost 24,000 jobs last January and February during the GST holiday. That is, January and February is a period where we're usually shedding jobs. We're shedding shifts, shedding jobs. There we were creating 24,000 jobs because we're so labor intensive. So just the slightest uptick in our businesses, you will see that make a huge impact to the economy. So we've got job creation, we've got easing the pressures on Canadians' food costs because we're saying all prepared food. And then we're also seeing that it would stimulate youth jobs because 40% of our workforce is youth. So, there's a lot of benefits to that GST ask, but then we've got different conversations going across different provinces. So whether that's looking at wholesale alcohol pricing, whether we're looking at some of the EI premiums and some of the other costs that really impact us from a policy perspective.
I sort of feel a little bit like the whole Buy Canadian movement that we've seen around Canadian retailers needs to be applied to restaurants too.
Yes, well, it's the local restaurants that are really your main employers on your main street, and they bring so much economic activity to the areas that we all love. So there is, and look, we did see a anti-American Buy Canadian sentiment within the restaurants when people were ordering. But I would say that there is an opportunity here for people to get out and support their local business, local restaurants. And you're going to see that pay back in spades.
And the support can be in any way, shape, or form, right? It doesn't have to go and sit in the restaurant. You do takeout. There are things you can do that will support the smaller Canadian, especially if they're restaurants you like and you don't want to see them go. Because I feel like, what's being outlined here, that this has the potential to go down a bad road.
Yes. I mean, to that point, this does have a direct impact with restaurants losing sales and having challenging profits. Inevitably means we're going to see less jobs within the sector. And that really does have a big impact on our economy and our local labor levels because we are the fourth largest private employer. So there really is a very quick impact when the restaurant industry sees an uptick in sales, but also at the same time when they start to see a drop in sales, because we don't have a lot of wiggle room in our businesses either. We're very value driven. So we want to pass on as best as we can to the consumer, savings and value and all of those things. We recognize where the consumer is at. But because we don't have that wiggle room, if we see a drop in sales and we continue to see drop in profitability, we have to cut shifts, we have to cut jobs, we have to pull back, and in some cases really make tough decisions around whether or not we're going to continue on and keep the lease going.
If we could end on a bright spot, what might it be?
I think at the end of the day, one of the biggest things that keeps operators going is the fact that Canadians love their restaurants. And any polling we do, we are still considered one of the best experiences that Canadians want to be able to do more often. So that right there is a really positive thing for us to remember, especially for those operators out there that this time of year in particular can be a bit tough. We're coming up to Valentine's Day, so hopefully we're getting closer to getting through the challenging winter slower period. But, Canadians love their restaurants and they are making a big impact in the communities that they serve.
Well, it's just so interesting the way you outlined, like this has a lot of tentacles that reach into communities that maybe other businesses don't have, that it's really worth, I guess, highlighting that if there is a restaurant you like, you need to support it because there are other fellow community members that could be impacted if it doesn't survive.
There is an incredible domino effect to our sector. We purchase over 50% of Canadian agriculture sales are purchased through restaurants. So there's a direct impact to the Canadian agriculture. And we look at our, we're a job powerhouse. We pay a significant amount of taxes. Like there is a real trickle down effect. We have a lot of suppliers and vendors and technology that depend on us to be successful. So, restaurants are a pretty significant part of our economy and would have a huge impact.
Well, I thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about this today, and hopefully this helps to spread the word.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
That's Kelly Higginson, the president and CEO at Restaurants Canada. And that wraps up another episode of In This Economy. Previous episodes are available on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. And feedback is welcome at kris.mccusker@rci.rogers.com. I'm Kris McCusker. Thanks for listening.
At Hill's Pet Nutrition, we know that pet parent guilt is real. That's why we make science-led nutrition to help you give more love than humanly possible. Because you're only human, there's Hill's. Find the right food at hillspet.com/science does more.